and Data Science event in Ottawa. Woo! So we are now live streaming, and Stanford is very excited and to promote us. So one of the first requirements before some of you sit down is we have to do a selfie, okay? So my apologies, I now got to go back and sit in the audience with you, and I am going to get my charming son to now come up here and take a picture of us all. Yeah, that's the problem of having a mother. So everybody wave. Okay, when he starts. Okay, wave. Can you get us? Yep. Okay. Go again? Okay, okay. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. No, it's fine. Be up here. Okay, so we have an exciting day today. This morning we have a couple of panels and discussions, two keynotes, and then we'll be moving off to the lunch area there for further networking, and then after that you can tour the museum. So to start, we have a keynote from Element AI, Nagar, I got to work on the name, Rustamazada, and she's a data scientist from Element AI. Focus for the first session will be on a social aspect of AI and discuss what is AI and how you can use it from a social perspective, impact, ethics from AI. Moderating that first panel will be a fabulous lady from IBM, Michelle, I always forget the last names, Michelle Pellegrin, and joining them will be from Georgian Partners, Perry Sobani, and Annika Mukherjee from the University of Ottawa. So a keynote from Nagar to start. We'll open up the panel, and then it's Q&A. We have a couple of microphones at the front. We have a Twitter feed happening that you saw initially when you entered, and so very much interactive discussion. Okay? Nagar, would you like to join me up here?
Thanks, Alison, for the intro. I'm learning to work with... How should I start slides? Excuse me, how should I start the slides? Thank you. So, we're starting. I'm Negar Rostamzadeh, and I'm a research scientist at Element AI. And at Element AI, I'm in the fundamental research lab and basically doing research on the field of computer vision and mostly using deep learning. So today I will be starting the talk with explaining what artificial intelligence is and the application in computer vision. And after that, I will be briefly also talking about why it's important to promote the work that you're enjoying. So what is computer vision? Like, before starting with computer vision, I will tell you actually what is artificial intelligence. Well, artificial intelligence is basically based on the definition in 1950s. Is when you actually want machines to be able to solve a problem without having instructions line by line what to exactly do and how to solve the problem. So, and machine learning is can be considered as part of artificial intelligence, which you will have so much data and you will expect computer and machine solving the problem without instructing it or programming it like with rule-based models. And deep learning is basically part of machine learning again, which is based on neural network and like a deep neural network. So what is computer vision? So computer vision is like when you want machines to be able to comprehend what they see from the images or from sequence of images which is surrounding them. So humans are seeing through their visual system, and they can comprehend without knowing exactly what's happening in their visual system and like how can they preserve and comprehend what they're seeing. But machines are seeing like a bunch of numbers, and they want to make sense of those numbers. We want them to understand and comprehend it. So we want machine to be able to understand from this that this is a cat. So this is quite complicated task for a machine to understand and comprehend this is a cat. Particularly if you have like something like a deformation, like, okay, so it's easy for a human to understand that these are cats, but like for machine, like all the pixels are changing when you are having these deformations. So it needs to have like some intelligence to be able to understand them. Or occlusion. So it's, even for a baby human, it's kind of easy to understand that, oh, this is the tail of a cat, so it's probably a cat there who is hiding, or like the other images. But for machine, this is a pretty difficult task. So, or background clutter. You see, even solving a problem with cats, like, or like illuminations, like lights, like with changing the light, the task is becoming so difficult for machines compared to human. And also intra-class variations. So if you tell a child that this is a cat, and you do it like 3 or 4 times with 3 or 4 different types of cats, it's very likely if she sees like another cat being able to say that, oh, this is a cat. I realize this is a cat. But then for machine, it's another difficult and challenging task to be able to generalize what it actually sees. So this simple task in terms of like human, was a task which we were trying to solve for a long time. And it basically started from a long time ago, like 1960s was a decade which people started to care about computer vision. And it was like beginning of the speech about artificial intelligence and how can we understand from the way that brain or like physiology of a human is able to make human smart and use the same way for making computers also smart. So in something interesting is that in 1966, I guess, there was a group at Stanford who defined a project for solving computer vision in a summer. And basically, they put a camera in front of a computer, and they say, OK, so we want the computer being able to explain what it sees. And the project is a summer project. Well, we are still working on it. And like, it's more than 50 years, and we are still there. So it's not that easy. But then, like, so it initially started with understanding, OK, so how the brain works, and can we be inspired with the same way and solve the problem the same way? And starting from there, then, like, OK, so there were some interesting approaches which came, but then again, because of not having enough computational power and maybe like enough insights about the field, like after a while, those researchers were kind of like slowed down. And some other interesting works came about like how to understand the images with some rules. Like, okay, so if you want to understand this is a cat, look how cat looks like in pixel space. Understand the gradient information in the image and understand some features which can make you understand this is a cat and help computer by defining this characteristic. Like if you are looking for a human, understanding which parts of the body the human has, and through those body part understanding, okay, so this is a human because it has a head and limbs this way. So it was going through to that time, and like there were some really interesting research going on. And in 1919, I guess, 1990, there was a work from Jan LeCun which came and introduced convolutional neural network. And with convolutional neural network, it was supposed to understand the image the way that with some biological inspirations. And it became really successful, more or less the same model after a while. Because not exactly that time, in 2012, basically. After an ImageNet data set, there is a lab in Stanford that they collected a huge data set called ImageNet. And that was the first time that we had enough good amount of data which are labeled and are clean. This is part of the ImageNet classes and categories, and you see these are the predictions that you can see. This was a huge data set, and on top of having a good data set, computational power also improved. So this is actually the model that I was talking about, the convolutional neural network, which was suggested in 1998 with Jan LeCun. And basically, through this model, they were able to predict some of the images, which back then was they were mostly working on MNIST data set. And then in 2012, the winner of ImageNet competition came up with more or less the same structure, but more complicated and more depth. And as you see, the computational power also really improved during these years. And we got more closer to understanding image as well, and understanding what's going on in images. So one of the first tasks which was defined on this was image classification, understanding, okay, so object classification, and knowing, okay, so this is a cat, this is a dog, this is a boat, this is an elephant, or these objects. But then, what else can we expect from computer vision to understand? So we want computers to understand the same, not the same way, but comprehend as much as we comprehend. When we see a funny scene, we want the computer to understand the humor inside that image. Or when we see this guy is having his hand up, so the computer should also understand that he is doing this. So there were some other applications of computer vision. Here you can see understanding the human behavior through pose estimation, and also some of really interesting research in order to understand and comprehend the images better is via image captioning or detailed description of the images. So they were detecting different objects and trying to understand, okay, so what's going on in with respect to each of these objects. Here, this guy is wearing a skateboard. He is running. He is doing these activities. Or there is a bike there, or there is a truck here, and some explanation about all details of these images. Or going even further, being able to describe what you are seeing. It was one of the goals that they were initially defining in the summer project. So you see defining, okay, so this kid is doing this, and being able to make a model to be able to understand and caption image. So this is pretty interesting because it's kind of going through the direction that we want. We want it to understand what's going on and being able to explain it for us. So again, there are some examples of image captioning. A white teddy bear sitting in the grass, a man in a baseline uniform throwing a ball. These are actually so it's actually something really interesting. So there are some samples which is able to understand because of the model which it was trained with, but there are some samples which it's failing. A woman is holding a cat in her hand, Well, the clothes is kind of looking like cat based on its experience, machine experience from learning and seeing the world. So it's kind of like getting it wrong. So this is very common with machines because they don't have the same comprehension that we have. Or like the other one, a woman standing on a beach holding a surfboard. It's not like really true. So, or going even further and understanding all the details which is happening, still like it's very far from semantic that humans are able to understand. But this is one step again further to be able to ask machines to comprehend. So the fact is that we may ask, okay, so if humans are able to understand everything like way better than machines, why do we use machines for some of these tasks? Well, like the computational power that computers have and make them actually capable of finishing tasks faster than human, like being able to analyze like thousands of images in a microsecond comparing to human who may, and humans have like basically a capacity which is limited. Well, like they may not be able to be awake during the whole night and being able to label all the images and understand them and explain them for a specific defined task. But machines are supposed to take some of these parts and help assist human in solving these problems. So one of these problems that you can see is like basically, understanding different parts of the images, like, and exactly labeling them as, okay, so this is a tree, this is a human, and exactly knowing, okay, so where this human is, what the intention of this human is, and so on. And the other thing is about like art, basically. So something really interesting with computer vision that we can do is generate artistic images, which is usually done with generative models. And also, and this one is style transfer. You see some really interesting style transfer happens here. It's one of the applications of computer vision. And computer vision basically is not just used for searching images or image retrieval or object detection. It's also used for medical imaging. I think Annika will be talking more about this. And this is also really interesting, and it's really helping humanity by helping doctors in diagnosis or continuing the treatments, personalized treatments. So these are also part that computer vision, as well as like artificial intelligence in general, can help. And the other, so something interesting is that one of the recent approaches is generative model. Like one of the recent improvement in artificial intelligence is towards like generative models. And they initially were actually because of understanding the representation of the data. But then, like, now we are also like generating some very realistic images and solve some of the tasks with these generated images. For example, like here it's like one of our recent papers, which you see like these images are fully generated. Computers, machines haven't seen them. So they are trying to imagine or like understanding the representation of the data and generate another image which is sort of matched with the description of the data or like computer's comprehension. You see many of these images are like very likely to be true humans, but these humans were never alive or never existed. They're just like what was generated. Or here also like some samples from, well, some of them are actually very creepy. Some of these dogs, if you see like with 3 eyes, or some donuts which looks like dogs. So these are the, this is an ImageNet data set, basically that huge data set I was talking about. And computers like imagination about ImageNet or the comprehension. Or here you can see like one of the like there are some data sets that I've showed here, like it's celeb. Oh, it's basically a data set which is built by like artists or actress images. So you see here, like in each of them, like one of the computer vision or machine learning general is able to change, and generative model is able to change one characteristic of these images through time. Like you see, this is orientation variation. You see like the head is kind of like moving towards a different direction, or here's like applying a lipstick or changing a gender. And here is in painting, basically, you may have some image which like part of it is corrupted and you wanna making it like, you wanna feel that part, and again, like computer vision, machine learning is able to understand and feel that part. So why video understanding? Well, basically my background is on video understanding. I was always like, okay, so we don't have just single images, and the world around us is a sequence of images, and we want the computer to be able to use all this information and be able to solve some of the problems like video surveillance, and these are the things that like would be really great if computers be able to analyze without human assistance. And also I was always thinking about like, okay, so that would be great if someone who needs assistance or elderly being able to have access to a camera which is monitoring them, and like if there is something going wrong, being able to report to doctors. So these are all like parts of, like, these are all applications of video understanding. Okay, but what else? So I put like the funniest slide here. Back in the Future, I don't know how many of you have watched this movie, Back in the Future. Like it was trying to explain what's going on like in 20 years. And the 20 years was kind of like now. And if you see, like, this is a car which is flying. The car looks like the car 30 years ago, 50, 40 years ago, but it's flying. It's flying because they were thinking that in the future the cars are going to fly, but they didn't have any imagination about self-driving cars. And this like is again like a guy who is flying with his scooter. What's that? Yeah, he was flying. So it's like, even if we imagine what would be the most interesting application, we may not be able to actually predict it well, because there are other technologies who are advancing very fast. Like this self-driving car maybe was not predictable like 40 years ago exactly what's going on, or is it going to be feasible or handy. So like because of the improvement in other technologies, we may end up with having some really, really interesting applications which we don't have even the imagination for imagining them. So yeah, this is like, again, these self-driving cars, and also like this video transcription, which is, again, something interesting with videos. So I want to also like briefly also mention about like a list of women in machine learning, which is basically a directory of women in machine learning, which has like all the names of women who are working on the machine learning field. So if you think that there is like someone who you want to promote, or there is a work which interests you, please keep going and promote people. And some events like very close to this event. And yeah. So thank you. If you have any question? Thanks.
Wonderful. If I can have the panelists up to the stage, please. So good morning. My name is Michelle Pellegrin. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with all of you and those who are joining us virtually. I am a global executive at IBM, part of the IBM Watson Group. This topic is near and dear to my heart and all of our hearts, and I think it's quite exciting. It's a fun conversation to have. You know, data science and AI, as we know, there's so much behind it in terms of what Nagar shared and how the information is coming together. What I find particularly interesting is how it's going to change the way we live and work. You know, we have expectations now in society, ourselves, businesses and such, to consider how can you use this technology to transform what we do day in, day out. How are industries, companies, countries, and cities going to use this data to provide services that are faster, better, more insightful, and personalized? So joining me on the panel today, we have three wonderful women. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We have a number of questions to go through. We also have open mics. So if anyone has questions in the room, please feel free. I'm going to save some time at the end to have some additional questions. And for those who are joining us virtually, if you'd like, you can tweet your question, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we possibly can. So with that, Nagar, we had the pleasure of your introduction earlier on the keynote, so thank you very much for that. Annika, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello? Okay. So I am actually not currently working in the field of data science, but I am a master's student at the University of Ottawa currently in my second year. I am studying health sciences, but my project involves using artificial intelligence to develop medical diagnostic technologies. So that's kind of where the tie-in is. And a lot of what I'd like to discuss later has to do with the medical field. My project in particular has to do with classification using image data. So it's kind of what Nagar was touching on earlier, using computer vision in the field of artificial intelligence. So I'm looking at placental images, and I'm trying to teach the computer to distinguish between placentas that come from healthy pregnancies and those that come from unhealthy pregnancies. So this is kind of not really done before because a lot of people somewhat neglect the field of reproductive science, but there's a lot of work that's going on in the fields of cancer. People are doing a lot of work on breast cancer data sets and other medical visual data sets that are available, like MRI images, CT scans. Those are things that can also benefit from this sort of work. In terms of real experience in data science, I did do an internship this summer with a startup company in France who was also developing diagnostic technologies with medical data using artificial intelligence, and that is kind of where I got my exposure to machine learning and learning how to work with convolutional neural networks to process image data. So yeah, feel free to interrupt me as we go along, and I'll pass on the mic now.
Thanks. And Perry?
So this is Perry, and my background is research, machine learning, and deep learning. And I did my PhD in natural language processing, social media analysis. And now I work with Georgian Partners. It's a growth stage equity venture capital, but I'm not an investor. So our team, our impact team or R&D team, it's more like post-investment. Like we help our companies, our startups to adopt these new technologies and build better products. We are like R&D extension of all our startup companies. And I'm really happy to be in this field and working with like lots of engineers, data scientists, and machine learning scientists to hopefully build a better world and build better products and have business values as well. So yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you. Annika, let's start with yourself. So what would you say are some of the current barriers in developing AI technologies? So what are some potential solutions to overcome these barriers?
In terms of barriers, I think the major barriers are access to data sets. So most of my exposure is through the medical field, and a huge thing is ethics. So this is also a problem in the sense of fields like law or in the criminal fields, because there is no access to this data set. You need confidentiality agreements, and as a result of that, people who do have expertise in machine learning, with like a computer science background, for example, wouldn't be able to perform work in these fields. So I think a solution to that would be it would have to be policy changes really that allow medical data sets to be released, or data sets with like law documents, and basically just creating large data sets that machine learning and data scientist people can work with.
Thank you. Perry, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think you touched on a very good point. So basically, like one of our biggest problems right now is privacy. We have lots of privacy issues right now. So like why they don't allow like releasing the data set, the main reason is that privacy, and as individuals, we don't want to have like our private data to be accessible to anybody, and that's one of the biggest problems right now in and kind of barriers in machine learning community. And I believe that we have solutions like science-based solutions. So one of the solutions that we came up with is differential privacy. And differential privacy is all about like those methods that provides mathematical proofs that your algorithms or like your machine learning models cannot be reverse engineered to any individual data points. So basically, they provide mathematical proofs that you're gonna add noise to your models in a way that you don't kill all the utilities of your data, but you make your models private. And it's all about adding noise either to your inputs, in the process of the training of your models, or to the outputs of your machine learning models. But the outcome is that you're going to have the private models. So we believe that these technologies, that they have like mathematical proofs and they are based on science, are kind of solutions to a couple of these barriers that we have in machine learning community right now.
Thank you. Nagar, did you want to also comment?
I actually confirmed that like one of the biggest issue in in medical science is having access to the data and also privacy. If you've also seen also like in the talk, I was talking about like not having enough data was kind of like a gap in the field. And since we didn't have ImageNet data set, the field was going way slower. And I really think that it's going to be a big change if we can be able to improve more in differential privacy and being able to make the data more anonymized in a way that is not like decodable fast. We will be also improving in the medical science way faster. Thank you.
You know, this ties nicely into one of our other questions. So, Perry, I'm going to ask you to respond to this one. So, with regard to privacy, how do we define trust in AI specifically? And we know it matters. So maybe you can just touch on that. And as well, why is it important to develop that trust in AI?
That's a very good question. So basically, we use AI in trust as an umbrella term for privacy, machine learning, interpretability or transparency, and also fairness and bias in machine learning. These are all three main issues that we have in a machine learning community right now. These are active research problems. These are not easy problems. We can't have prescription for them. That's the steps that you have to follow and solve these problems. And the main reason that we believe these are important from both business perspective and also as individuals who are the end users of these models is that basically we want to build trust with the end users, and also we want to help the developers of machine learning products or models to be able to debug these models, to identify the blind spots, and of course building better models. And so as an example, most of our companies, they have AI-based products, but they don't provide the full automation. So basically, they still have human in the loop. What does it mean? It means these models provide recommendations to these humans. Either is that the officer who decides about the loan amount, or if it's a teacher or investigator who decides if there was a contract cheating or not, or if it was a customer success agent or salesperson who decides which customers to contact, because they believe they might churn or they might stop their subscription. So still we have these humans in the loop. And we, as a model, machine learning models provide recommendations for these humans. And it's all about this trust that these humans act based on those recommendations. If there is no such trust, they simply would not act based on those recommendations. So our machine learning models would be useless, basically. That's why we believe trust is important. The other reason is regulations. There are some industries that they are heavily regulated, and that's a requirement for them to build transparent or biased or fair models. Then the other reasons, I think, is that in terms of the business value, you can think of like breach of privacy or building racist or sexist models can have such huge catastrophic impact on your brand. So you should care if you are like building any AI models.
Thank you. Annika, I'd like you to comment on that. You were talking specifically about your research in the medical field. When I think of developing trust in AI and putting human lives potentially at stake, I'd like you to comment, please, on that.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. In the medical field, it's a huge, huge barrier to applying AI applications to develop new technologies because, for example, with my work, we're using image data, and we typically use these algorithms called convolutional neural networks, and that is a big black box. You cannot go back and ask the algorithm, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you classify that image as having a tumor and that one as not having a tumor? It just can't tell you. You just have to trust that it did it right, and that's impossible to tell doctors and patients as well. So the solution to that is kind of that at the end of the day, the algorithm will only provide a best guess or get you closer to the solution, and then a doctor would be there to make the final decision. But yeah, it's definitely a barrier.
We're going to come back to the impact on human jobs in a few minutes. But Nagar, can you comment on the trust element, please?
Actually, like one of the things is that since many of these machine learning approaches is database, basically, machine learning will learn because of the data which it has access to, and is trained on some data. And most of the data sets which are available have so much biases embedded inside them. There was a research work a few years ago with this awkward title as women are housemakers and men are programmers. And the reason was that they were training some models on some text which was existed. And based on this text, what the computer machine realized using NLP approaches was to understand, okay, so women should be housemakers, but these are very dangerous biases which we don't want. We know that the society were biased with several years, and some of the data which were shaped in many years are biased data. So some of the actually missions of this kind of research is either unbiasing the data or also using this biased data but being able to have interpretable model to interpret them and also address the parts which has problem and being able to solve them.
Actually, let's, Nagar, I'm going to stick with you for just a minute. On that, how do you see, I'm going to kind of combine two questions here. So how do you see AI transforming society? I know that's a big question, but what would you see as some of the fundamental ways that it is going to transform? And coupled with that, perhaps some of the most interesting problems computer vision is going to solve as we move forward.
So that's a very interesting question. Actually, AI has already transformed part of the society. We are trusting a car to sit there without any driver and with minimum supervision. So, and society is going towards smart cities. Some of the jobs are going away because AI is kind of replacing those jobs, but it's not always a bad news. It's like most of the news are positive news. Basically, some of the jobs which were dangerous are kind of we are hoping that they could be eliminated or be done with least human intervention, and they will be replaced, of course, with other jobs which is more suitable for human. And the other thing which I would say is medical science, basically the most important part which I think would be really interesting to solve and improve the society is on medical science. If AI can help with solving these problems, and as both Pari and Annika said, with transparency and also using basically differential privacy, being able to anonymous this data, and also being able to use this data after that then like I think the society will improve a lot. And about your next question about computer vision, well, basically, again, I will kind of like refer it to the discussion, the talk, which it might surprise us with the new applications, which we don't even have any expectation about them, because we don't know about, like, we are not in details about all technologies which existed and may be improving in a few years. Mm-hmm. So I think by improving other technologies, we may end up with having really more interesting computer vision tasks that can be addressed than what we are addressing now.
All right, thank you. Annika?
So related to how it's going to transform society, the way I think it will the most is in terms of our safety. So the prime example that I'm thinking of is self-driving cars. So it'll really take the equation of accidents out. And I think in terms of safety, there's also the Internet of Things. So in a lot of machines today, we have sensors, and those sensors are constantly sending information to the Internet of Things, and that is a huge bank of data for data scientists. And what this allows us to do, or one of the applications, is to make predictive analytics, and it helps us to prevent a disaster from happening before it happens. So this could be like a windmill turbine breaking, this could be a car on the highway, like anything really that's a machine and that has sensors can benefit from this and help our safety.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Perry?
I believe that the biggest impact going to be making humans more efficient, and it can be either in medical, it can be in sales, it can be anywhere, like anywhere that humans are like working and acting and performing. I think we can use machines to make them more efficient, and it's kind of with the industry like age where we started with like replacing humans with like in like more like laborers, like more choric, like clerical kind of works, and we were all very happy, and I think it's the continuing of the same thing, but now like we have more machines in the decision-making process, and they are more in the more critical kind of processes, and that's why it's more scary, and that's why it provided more concerns, or like people are more concerned about it. But I think at the end, like we are talking about fairness or bias in machine learning models, and we already see some like bad consequences of like using AI and machine learning. But actually these kinds of biases and like existed in human processes as well. And our hope is to just, even if we can't remove it completely, at least we can have like better models. We can at least reduce the amount of like noise or errors or like bias in the processes by replacing them with, or at least by having still human in the loop, but making them more efficient by using AI and machine learning.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, there's so many wonderful industries that are going to be taking advantage or are taking advantage of AI technologies. You mentioned the Internet of Things. You know, how can cities operate more effectively, efficiently, and have that right down to the individuals, you know, in terms of finding their route into their office in the morning, not just a Google Map function, but something much more intelligent than that. How do we help and use AI to increase crop production worldwide, to help address some major issues, healthcare we've touched on. So I'd like to spend a little bit more time specifically on, we've touched on some of these industries, but would you say all industries are benefiting in the same way at this time from AI? Which ones are ahead of the curve? Which ones do you think are really on that leading edge of really taking off?
So that's a very interesting question. So some of the, so I would say always it's the case, not just about AI or not just about this specific topic. Companies which are like very resistant about changing and being flexible will usually step back, and they may not improve as much as other companies. So I think flexibility is like one of the important thing that I expect companies to have, and particularly with this like fast pace of artificial intelligence and deep learning. So I think companies who are still resistant about using artificial intelligence to assist their services will probably having a slower progression compared to other companies and other industries.
What would you say, Nagar, before we move the pass on the microphone, what would you say might be the top 3 industries that you think are going to benefit significantly over the next few years? Which ones are really going to be the top industries to take advantage of AI and computer vision?
Well, I think businesses which are dependent, like which are have heavy relation with artificial intelligence, like I would also say like the company that I'm working currently on, Element AI, which is a company which was shaped because of artificial intelligence and making it available and accessible to many industries and businesses, which had hard time maybe to have access to these services and these artificial intelligence services. So one of them is this, and the other industry, or I would say again, like I would go back to healthcare, and I think that's also will benefit from these advances in artificial intelligence. And the other thing is like, again, like self-driving car is kind of like going very fast, and I think in a few years it's not going to be a concern anymore. So it just remains on like the creativity of people, the ideas which came to your mind as a startup that could be really interesting, and now everything is moving so fast. So that's again like another thing that can be interesting, like thinking about different applications of artificial intelligence.
Thank you. Annika?
So I strongly agree about business being the top industry that would benefit from this, because I think they already are the one that is benefiting the most and that are implementing AI technologies in the most secure way right now. Like if you think of Amazon, for example, and they have their recommender systems, that's working very well. Google Ads, for example. And I think part of the reason for this is, again, related to the openness of data sets. So if we think about Google, there is a multitude of images, and because they're all open source, we can use crowdsourcing to label them, and that's a great data set for supervised machine learning. But I would humbly disagree about your comment about medicine, because I think it will be one of the slowest to advance in the next 3 to 5 years, for some of the reasons we touched on earlier as well, just because we don't have any data. For my project, for example, we have 140 images, and a convolutional neural network would like to see 1 million, ideally, to properly classify anything. So it's hugely limiting, and I think some major changes will need to happen in order for that field to catch up to the others.
Thank you. Perry?
So I think by now we are all on the same page that when we are talking about artificial intelligence, we are not talking about the general artificial intelligence that you have seen in the science fiction movies. We are talking about the narrow artificial intelligence that already enabled so many, or like the most successful technology businesses. And we are on the same page that it already transforming like financial technology, market technology, and lots of like similar technologies or verticals. Of course, some of the verticals were slower in adopting these technologies, and I think there are several reasons we can argue. Like one of them might be like having limited access to data. The other one is like there are humans that they have lots of benefits in not allowing AI to replacing them because they believe, I think it's like very short-sighted, but that's again, maybe that's because humans that they are in those kind of like technologies, they are not willing to adopt these technologies. But I think at the end, AI will provide fundamental shift in the software, at least industry, what is software, what it is capable of doing, and it can even change the definition of software. And I'm pretty like excited for this new age.
I am too. I'm going to let you hold on to that for a second. So one of the burning questions right now around AI is, of course, what's the effect on human jobs? We've touched on that a little bit. At IBM, our CEO, Ginny Rometty, certainly has been very clear. She uses the phrase augmented intelligence, not necessarily artificial intelligence in the way it's commonly used. And the reason is, it is positioned, we're positioning at least, it's not a man versus machine. It is a man and machine. And how do we operate in a way that is beneficial while leveraging the data, leveraging the insights, but still ensuring that man is, a person is still involved and making those tough decisions and the decisions that are coming from using that information. So really burning, important question. And I'd really like to take a minute for each of you to share your perspective on that. And if you can also go a little bit further, maybe if you have any thoughts or ideas on which jobs might be more likely to be eliminated or which ones are more likely to still remain critical.
I think based on the predictions, 16% of the current job might be replaced by using AI and ML. But I totally believe that there are going to be new jobs. Like right now, data scientists, or data science in general, is very hot, and we didn't have such even job title before. So it's already making new jobs. So I don't have any problem with that and I still believe that we're going to have, as you said, I do agree as well that we still have humans in so many different jobs. And we are making them more efficient, we are making them smarter. And that's why, for example, we care about model interpretability, because it helps humans because we don't want to only provide predictions or the probabilities, we also want to provide evidence and the logic behind the models, because then humans can combine these logics or evidence with their own kind of logics or background or knowledge and even make better decisions. So that's why we have lots of we have an active research area in ML community around interpretability and transparency. So I think I myself believe that future is bright. We're gonna have better, and my hope is that we're gonna have machines that are more accurate and more consistent in decision making, because we have seen terrible kind of consequences of having human decision making so far in our societies. So I think, I think that's it.
I think that there are actually several jobs that are at risk, and these are mostly jobs related to manual labor or jobs that are monotonous, like factory jobs will likely disappear in the next few years because we can easily replace those type of things with robots. And those can learn fairly quickly from us because there isn't too much creativity involved in those sort of jobs. However, I think that jobs that do involve creativity will be secure forever, because I personally don't think we can ever teach creativity and human spirit to a computer. And not to fear, I don't think a robot will ever be over you on an operating table, because as Michelle was saying earlier, the computer, the algorithms are meant to be a tool or an aid to humans and not to be the final solution. So it's just to make our lives easier and make the monotonous tasks go a little bit faster. And another thing is that computers lack human intuition, and they'd never be able to make inferences in situations where we see new cases. So an analogy I like to give often is that if we were trying to teach a computer what a human face looked like, and we gave all of your faces in the audience as examples to teach it, and then it learned that fairly well and its accuracy was really high, and then we showed my face and asked, is this a human? It would say no, because it has never seen my face before, and the sample size is fairly small here, so it just wouldn't have that intuition. Whereas if you ask a 3-year-old child the same question, it would have been able to use its years of knowledge that it has acquired over time and be able to infer that I am indeed a human. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So, basically, there are a few jobs which probably will be eliminated, and I think some of them are really good to be eliminated. Some of the jobs which are dangerous for people who are doing them, like maybe for health, like health matters, like some works which you have like close contact with contaminations or chemical substances. These jobs might be eliminated because of like having robots who will be taking care of those situations, or some like imagine that like some works which may actually have like more danger for the human, like this kind of jobs could be the jobs which will be eliminated in a good way. But then also like AI is like as Pari and Anika said, the AI will be assisting humans in some other domains and jobs, which sometimes is going to be dangerous. Like imagine that a lawyer, like in a court, the judge use AI assistance and using probability to give a number of years or a sentence. This is not always positive. You may have like your data might be biased. You may have like so many people like me who committed crime, but then like I myself be a different person from them. So this kind of like adding this prior to this decision making, in my opinion, is kind of dangerous. I don't have currently a solution for embedding this information, but in a safe way. But might be like interpretability and understanding exactly what's going on and why we are realizing this could be something. But I've also seen some researches where basically like having a head pose and taking a picture may like you then the machine learning system will predict the sexual orientation of the person. So it's like these are something which is so biased, and I think like these decisions shouldn't go to machines. Even in terms of assistance, like these are kind of dangerous to put them all in machines.
It's a very good point, and there is risk associated with some of this technology, which we all have to be very conscientious about and aware of as they are developed and used in society. And just to be clear, Nagar is not a criminal. I'm going to ask the panelists one other more personal question, but after that, if you could please, if anyone in the audience or those listening in virtually have any questions, we'll open it up for questions in just a minute. So please get your questions ready, get ready, maybe start tweeting your questions and we'll capture them as best as we can. All right, so personal question. There's a lot of people in the audience and watching virtually, young folks, young women in university or in various parts of their career. You all have chosen this as your career path. So I'm curious to know what got you started and why do you believe this is such a great spot to be?
Going back to my story, basically, one of the things which I was always like following was that not go to a strict path and always like see everything, all the options and opportunities and areas which would be interesting and try to explore them. Even in terms of location, like starting from my background, I'm like I did my undergrad at University of Tehran in Iran. And after my undergrad, during my undergrad, I went to a summer school in computer vision. It was really interesting for me because I had there was a book that I read during my undergrad, Machine Learning for Chris Bishop, and it made me interested in understanding one of the application of machine learning, which was computer vision. I went to a summer school in Zurich, in ETH University, and after that I started applying for PhD program. So I started my PhD in Italy in a multimedia and human understanding group at the University of Trento, and then after that I went to Queen Mary University of London for an internship on human understanding, human body pose estimation in videos, and then after that I came to Mila Montreal Institute of Learning Algorithm, and I stayed there for about 2 years of my PhD, working mostly on deep learning approaches for video understanding and computer vision problems. And during my internship, I went to also another internship at Google Machine Intelligence team during my Google internship, I was working with this one of the new products of Google. Again, I was working on video understanding, and so this was an interesting problem for me because it's always fascinating to see how machine can understand the same thing that humans are able to understand, and this can improve the society in many really, really good aspects as well. So, and I'm also inviting all of you who are interested or in job market to apply for Element AI. We have many positions which could suit people who are interested and inclined to experience a new opportunity in data science and machine learning.
Thank you. Annika?
All right, so how I ended up here, I just kind of fell into this place, actually. I have a background in just basic sciences. I studied biomedical sciences at the University of Ottawa, and now I'm doing my master's in health sciences, so it's not really the place where you find very many computer scientists. But I was fortunate to do the international internship in France, working with that startup company, and that's where I really fell in love with data science, and I realized that there's a whole world out there of machine learning and so many problems to solve. And I think it's a really great place to be because it's a really hot area right now, and there aren't a lot of people in it. So that means great jobs are available, high pay because it's not very saturated just yet. Also, I strongly encourage anybody who's in science or actually unrelated fields to computer science to enter into machine learning fields because you have an edge. Very few people are trained in two domains, so it's a very, very desirable skill set to have for companies that are looking into combining both.
So I did my bachelor also in Iran, and during my bachelor I found artificial intelligence very fascinating, and it wasn't hot, especially in Iran at that time. So I was one of those lucky people that follow their passion, and it turns out to be one of the hottest areas right now. But I think we all, in science and technology and engineering, we are all building skills that can be reusable in machine learning and data science. One of the biggest skills that you need when you are working on machine learning or data science is problem solving. And I think you are developing that thinking process that helps you. And also the math behind it, it's not the most complex math, but still you need to have the basics of linear algebra and statistics. And most of the people in science and technology, they have such background. Coding and programming also is really important, but it's not exactly, again, for machine learning and data science, nowadays there are lots of tools, frameworks, libraries, educational kind of materials that it's so easy to develop these kinds of skills. So it's really encouraging. It shouldn't I think the most important skills right now is problem solving and confidence that you can do it. And I think most of us can do it.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, let's open it up for questions. So we have first question over here.
Hi, this is for Annika. Hi, my name is Laura Peck. I am a senior partner at Transform Leaders. I also had a placenta previa pregnancy, and in fact, I showed Michelle a picture of his very messy room this morning. So my question to you is, what is it you would like to know when you're discussing placenta? And I am volunteering if you want to talk to somebody who's actually delivered that way. And unfortunately, you only have 140 images so far. I certainly don't have any images of my earlier ultrasounds. But anyway, what is it that you're studying, and what would you like to know more about it?
Thank you, Laura. So what I'm studying in particular is a disease called preeclampsia. And what it is that the woman will develop hypertension, really high blood pressure, about 2/3 through the pregnancy. And if it's not taken care of, she can have seizures and pass away. Currently, it's a huge problem because there is no cure. So people suspect that the problem in this case is the placenta, and that there's insufficient blood flowing between the mother and the child, and that's what causes the placenta to break off from the uterus and cause these seizures potentially if it gets into your blood flow. So what we're looking at, I'm looking at the visual characteristics of the placenta. So there are definitely other aspects like clinical presentation, like the woman's blood pressure along the way, other, their Doppler, the ultrasounds. But I'm looking at the visual characteristics, so I would definitely be interested in speaking to you about your experience previously, before you were pregnant and throughout the pregnancy, because I'm curious to know if there are patterns prior to delivery that relate to placental problems, because that's how we can predict them and develop targets for new drugs or new therapeutic targets, essentially.
Great question. Question over here?
Hi, my name is Nidhi. I run the big data practice with Pythian. I'm in AI and analytics a lot, so that's my background. One of the things which always scares me is with so much productivity in-house, with so much data set still being available, we talked about biased data. So aren't we training our minds to go in all predictive way and shutting down the spontaneous decision making with AI? So what are your thoughts on it?
So, do you want to?
Sorry, I didn't understand completely your question. You said you are concerned about bias in data, right?
In a way, I'm looking at a viewpoint where with so much predictive models in-house or predictive data in-house, how can we be still more spontaneous in decision making? Because that's the human instinct. That's basically the way humans should think. With so many things in-house, I can go option A, option B, option C. But what if, there is a spontaneous decision I need to make?
So I think it's a very good point on you need still to have options. So we believe exactly like humans' expertise, we should develop models that they have they are looking at the problem from different perspective, and they are different experts, and still you should have access to different experts the same as you have. And still we believe they should be experts, AI-based experts and human experts, and they should be able to exchange information the same as humans do. And it's all about you have to combine all these knowledge, and spontaneous. It's really is basically they're gonna give. It's very easy to have a spontaneous decision making for AI-based products, because it's all about just representing you in a numerical kind of space, and it's based on all your histories, all your images or your information about your kind of treatments, or and then just all the nurses, they take all this information, so these are already in the systems, and it's just transforming them, and just machine's going to process them, and spontaneously they're going to give you an answer, because these are trained machines. These are trained machine learning models. I didn't understand the point in bias, but we have lots of bias, especially in healthcare. The biggest bias problem is that the training data of our models are not representative of the actual population. For example, we might not have enough representative samples from people of color. And that's why our models are making more mistakes or making more errors for people of color. Or if it is we might not have enough samples of women's in our training data, and then that's where the bias is coming from. It's one of the source of bias is as Negar mentioned, is bias in representation, because it's kind of inherits all our values and biases. But the other one is when we are building our training data, it's not a representative of the actual population.
Other questions, and we will get to those. Are there any questions that are coming through Twitter? I want to give the opportunity for those questions to be asked. Okay, we'll pause on that in a minute. I think you were next.
So I'm a digital analyst who's also a business person, and one of the challenges we had in my industry for a long time was the access to data sets. So as Canadians, what do we need to do to get access to our data scientists to get to the data sets? I know the Government of Canada has an open data initiative, but how does that get bigger, faster for you?
Great question.
This is again like a very difficult question. Like, yeah, like having enough data is always like really great, and well,
does it need to be built into policy? Does it need to be like, what do we need to tell Canadians to ask for and demand?
But for like non-medical data, there are so many like there could be some initiatives. But for medical data, since it's going to be more tricky, and it's also like, if the data is private or like people don't want to have like their medical records online or available for other people without like being anonymized, it could be a problem. But for other fields, there could be some benefits with them sharing their data, and like if all companies like agree to share their data for good, then they will also like have access to good outcome based on like understanding and realizing the data that they have. Like they will get to know more about their data, and like being able to like imagine that there are several companies who are willing to share their data, but only with other companies who are sharing also their data. Then it could be a really strong machine learning system with probably less bias, because it's collected through different companies and different sources. And then they all will be using the benefits coming out from that strong model. So this is something which I think would be interesting. But again, I don't have any concrete answer for this question.
So I do think that one element of it would be policy changes, because I'm going to talk about medical data again, but if data is anonymized, and data scientists could sign some kind of confidentiality agreement, that would be hugely beneficial for those people to benefit from those kind of things, because there are some open data sets out there, not through the Government of Canada, I don't think.
Not
but
for medical, I don't think.
Yeah, but there are some from, I think, Brazil with breast cancer, but that's really kind of the only big one out there. And then I think the other element where Canadians can actually participate is when you go to the doctor and someone approaches you doing recruitment and asking for your permission to release your information for research, just saying yes if you're okay with it.
I think in terms of individuals, we all have the options to participate, to be part of these data sets. But in terms of the businesses, like you should incentivize like the businesses to participate and to be part of like the bigger data sets. And like our companies are B2B companies, and then they are building one machine learning models per each partner or customer. And then it's so hard to convince them that you should, if you share your data, and if we aggregate data, we can build a model that it is better for all of you. It's going to be a win-win kind of scenario. But they were so like resistant. But at the end, we demo like a kind of like a model that's based on data aggregation, and we kind of provide enough evidence that that's going to be the business value that it can create if you participate in this kind of data sharing. And they were convinced. So like in terms of the business, you have to provide the business value or incentives for like businesses to participate, to be in those kind of bigger data sets.
Great question.
Thank you.
Great question. Why don't we go over here?
Hi, I'm Lisa Fast. I'm a UX and computer science background and behavioral psychology. And I'm just wondering, a lot of the biases that you're talking about that creep into the data come from humans in the first place. And I like the idea of augmenting, because it's like two pieces of Lego. You have to fit these pieces together. You can't just, for example, an AI provide information. So I guess what I'm asking is, are you seeing behavioral researchers pairing up so that your augmented intelligence hits the right spots of people to solve the problems, as opposed to transmit their biases like viruses between them in the data sets? Like, are you seeing the behavioral science coming through?
There are lots of research in cognitive science and interdisciplinary kind of researches in psychology and computer science and AI and artificial and machine learning, where they are kind of working on humans' perception versus machine perception and how you can combine these kinds of these are like two perspectives. How can you improve human perception or perspective by adding machine perspective? And this is an active research problem. It's not my domain of expertise, but there are lots of research going on in this area. And I think people can understand the value. You are completely right.
Well, actually, I just briefly wanted to say, I think that's really, really interesting and something that hadn't occurred to me. And I don't know how they would augment it, but I was interested in if you have any thoughts on how that could be done.
Well, it was actually prompted when you talked about don't fear the surgeon, that your surgeon will be replaced by a robot. Because I'd actually sometimes like my surgeon to be replaced by a robot. Because I don't think they'd leave the sponge behind. And I don't think they would operate on the wrong piece of body. And those are all scenarios that happen all the time, right? They use the checklist that they're supposed to use, right? So that's what I mean about can we not, the augmenting takes that into account, right? It's about making a better solution rather than one or the other. You've got to understand what gaps you're filling. That's the part, is the gaps, right? Yeah. I don't know. That's not the answer.
It's a great question. Yeah.
Actually, that's a really interesting point with basically having artificial intelligence kind of like accompanying, being replaced with a surgeon or with someone who is doing already a task. Well, something which artificial intelligence, if they learn a task to do it well, and not being biased, like if we don't have any of these problems, they are supposed to learn it and do it well, like not doing any mistake. Because humans have several problems such as fatigue when they are doing a task for repetitive time for several times. So they may end up with having something wrong or do mistake. And one of the initial idea with having a system to help human or being replaced in some tasks with human is decreasing this kind of mistakes. Like in my field, basically in surveillance, in understanding the videos, if you ask a human to sit there and look for abnormally in a video, it's kind of like maybe she's going to do it well for an hour, but then at the second hour, it's just she's missing everything. It's just a long.
I do it well for 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's I bet 5, a superhuman basically. So this is one of the things which I guess robots or machine learning should be replaced, not totally, but at least assisting humans or assisting a surgeon. So having something in their ears, oh, you need to take out that sponge. Well, this is not my expertise, but I'm just trying to make some sense from what I'm saying. So, and the other thing that you mentioned about biases, there is a conference about fairness, accountability, and transparency that happened last week. Videos are also online. It's pretty interesting. I really encourage you to watch some of the videos. It's actually based on understanding what artificial intelligence systems are doing, or how we can how we can actually trust systems better, and what can we do to increase this trustability. So, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I think in the spirit of time, I think there were some other questions, but everyone will be around at break, and if you have any additional questions, please feel free to approach the panel. Allison, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No, thank you. That was excellent.
Okay.
I did want to introduce Danielle from Iversoft, by the way, an AI company here. And there was another mic that I should have given you. And Iversoft has been working on the digital marketing strategy. So if you're ever doing digital marketing, maybe look into their company. So they've created a survey for us, and they're running the Twitter feed. So Danielle, did you want to speak about it?
Yeah, so we're going to get some of your feedback throughout the event today and afterwards. So our first survey is up. There's a bit.ly link there, bit.ly/WIDS Ottawa. And just to get your feedback from the first half of the session, and we'll have some more later on. Just remember to be using the hashtag WIDS Ottawa and WIDS 2018, which is trending in Ottawa, so let's keep tweeting. And also, I'll put a plug in for a LinkedIn group that we have that's WIDS Ottawa. So if you want to keep continuing the discussion there, please join us. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think, Allison, everyone's on break now until 10:45. Is that?
Correct, 15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
has a more business side to it, looking at how we could monetize AI, get some value from AI, business leverage it. And it's interesting, as a couple of my colleagues are here, and I was tweeting about an article that I read yesterday from Wired magazine. And it was interesting, with Wired and Stanford, they did an analysis that 26% of the women who graduate with a STEM degree, only 26% of them go into work for technology companies. And they said, well, because everybody's desperate for high-tech resources, technically trained people, women, and that's the intent is there's a lot of smart women already trained. Let's give them visibility. And what they analyzed was the way the females are interviewed in the process kind of turned the women off from joining technology companies. So interesting article, might be worth the read for you as far as a bias is starting there. And we had spoken earlier in this morning's session about biases. So that's a human bias. I don't know if AI can do anything about the interview process. Okay, so our next keynote speaker is Jody Wallace, Managing Director, Accenture Canada, with a focus in AI, but she has lots of other background and experience in other technical fields. So thank you, Jody, welcome. And joining her then on the panel will be moderated by Fananan from IT World Canada, who is generously live streaming this event for us. And also Dr. Cindy Gordon, who is the CEO and founder for Sales Choice, and probably one of my earliest champions for this event. And Kara McMillan, who is president of Halcyon Consulting, which is focused on the environment and how to leverage AI to benefit environmental issues and address environmental issues. And oh my God, Solomon from Shopify. And obviously Shopify utilizes, who's director of data science. And Shopify has a lot of B2B companies who they're pushing to leverage AI for their business strategies and execution. Okay? So, Jody, please kick us off. Thank you.
There was a trick, right? Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and nice to see you all. Oops. Okay. Well, that's good enough. Just before I started, I wanted to make one comment around the last panel, which I found to be a great discussion. This was about the combination of humans and machines, and so there were a number of questions around, to what extent will the machines be able to take over human tasks, and if so, what's left for humans? There was a study that was done by Harvard Medical School recently, and they used the topic of identifying metastatic breast cancer. When they asked the machine that they had trained to identify metastatic breast cancer, it was able to do so with about 92% accuracy. When they asked the pathologist to do the same thing, they were able to do it with 97% accuracy. And when they combined the two together, they were able to get to 99.5% accuracy. That's the model that I have in my mind for how AI really needs to be thought of in the context of not just medical, but business and society and the way we live and work. So one of the things that we do at Accenture is we really work with clients who are large companies to help them identify ways to improve their operations. That might be to gain efficiencies, that might be to generate new revenue sources, that might be to create environments where their customers and employees are very happy to live and work. And so when we talk to our clients about AI, we talk to them about it not from a research perspective, but from a very practical perspective. And we heard lots of great information about the research and how much work has gone into getting us to the point where we're at. The reality in practice, all of that training that we need the data for that has happened behind the scenes, we sort of assume has happened. And now we take all of that training that's been available and apply it to real-world business problems. So the definition we think of for AI changes a little bit. And the way that we talk to our clients about it is it's really a combination of technologies that work together to sense, to comprehend, and to act. And the act part is really important because we can come up with fantastic insights, but if we cannot embed those insights into our everyday processes, then we have an interesting experimentation process, but we really haven't moved the ball forward. What is common to these things and what makes them classified as AI is a learning component. So learning components, we heard some discussion this morning from Nagar, as computer vision is one of the technologies that has a learning component. So we use training data to teach the computer how to recognize objects. Another very common example that uses deep learning is natural language processing. So for those of you that have iPhones, you know that when you started using Siri a few years ago, she had no idea what you were talking about. She could barely understand it when you said good morning. And today she's getting pretty good at understanding you and answering your questions. That is because Apple has been applying lots and lots and lots of training data of the human voice, and Siri has gotten much smarter because of it. And so that's an example, again, of a technology that has an underlying learning component. When we talk about AI today in a business context, in an industry context, what's important to understand about the data is that data infrastructure has come a long way in the last 3 years. So most AI practitioners will tell you that if businesses started to apply AI in a mainstream way 3 years ago, they would have gotten pretty much nowhere. But today we have a few things for us. One is a lot of companies, and this is very true in Canada, have invested in data infrastructures. So this is either big data platforms, data analysis tools. They've also invested in getting access to the right levels of cloud computing power so that they can process information on a real-time basis that's pretty quick. And what's happened because of these two things is we've seen a proliferation of new products and services in the form mostly of AI cognitive services and AI software. So in 2017 alone in Canada, there was $250 million of private money invested in AI startups. That's a staggering amount of money in the Canadian startup landscape. And the reason that is with the data infrastructures that are available in companies and with the compute power that's available, software companies are now able to put together solutions that companies can implement. And all of this is leading to what we're calling a democratization of AI skills. So that doesn't mean that anybody can do this, but it certainly means that we no longer need, implementing AI is no longer the exclusive realm of PhDs, that our PhDs continue to make tremendous progress on the research side, and we now have lots of people who can understand the application of these tools. So when we talk to our clients, the question is, how does this help me? What are the ways I can think about making money or saving money or advancing my customer experience? And we talk about 5 levers. The first is the one that gets talked about the most because it's kind of the low-hanging fruit. How do we use AI to gain efficiency? And we like to call it intelligent automation because we've been gaining efficiency a lot over the last 20 years. There have been automation tools and technologies that have come up. Most of these automation tools and technologies prior to AI, however, are what I would call brittle. They are very subject to errors caused by changes in their environment. So think about a process that gets automated where we record a human manually taking data from one system and entering it into another. We can easily train and automate. We can easily automate that task by simply recording it and playing it back. However, when one of those underlying systems changes, we have a break in the process, and we need to go back and re-automate. What AI allows us to do is get a little bit smarter about that kind of process automation so that it's not so brittle. The second is improved interactions. With the natural language processing advances that I was talking about earlier, and it's both natural language understanding as well as natural language generation, There has been a very large uptake in companies that are using virtual agents or chatbots in order to improve their interactions. Many of them start off saying, well, this is a way to cut costs. I don't need as many human agents. But quickly, I think you will find that companies are recognizing that it's a way to actually improve the quality of the service that can be delivered. And it's also a way to allow the human agents to really focus on the most difficult problems in order to improve the customer experience. We have some clients who have upwards of 15 or 20,000 human agents. Can you imagine the difficulty in trying to get a baseline, consistent quality customer experience across 15 or 20,000 human agents? It's almost impossible, but it can be done when we add virtual agents into the mix. Enhanced judgment, there's a book coming out by a couple of Rotman professors in April, and the book is called Prediction Machines. And in it, what they describe as the AI situation from an economic point of view is that AI and intelligence that it approximates is looking to replace two components of the human brain. It's prediction and judgment. Pretty much everything we do has a prediction component and a judgment component. Based on the noises my stomach is making, I predict that I am hungry, and I'm going to make a judgment as to what I should eat. Or I'm going to predict what my store sales are going to be in the month of March or in the month of April, and I'm going to make a judgment as to how much product I'm going to order. What this book talks about is that AI is getting really, really, really good at prediction, not as good at judgment. So this is another example where we're combining humans and machines. If we can take business problems that have a prediction component to them and ask the machines to do a much better job than we can as humans in predicting, then we can use our human judgment to decide what to do about those predictions. The fourth is deepen trust, and we heard a little bit about this in the panel this morning talking about safety and security. AI is quite good at identifying things like fraud, and it's quite good at identifying fraud in non-rules-based ways. So up until now, we have lots of fraud detection systems all around us. We have surveillance that's looking for patterns. And as some of you may know, the incidence of false positives are extremely high. Has anybody ever had their credit card decline when they themselves were making the purchase? That's because, yes, right? I know I'm not supposed to say this. There's a lot of women in this room, so probably the answer is yes in that case. But the incidences of false positives in fraud detection across the board are really high. And that is because we have been training in the past, we've been training machines based on very simple rules that says if somebody uses a card in Toronto and tomorrow they use a card in Vancouver, that's probably fraudulent. So that may be fraudulent behavior for some of us, but it may actually be completely normal behavior for others of us. And so using AI to detect fraud and prevent fraud allows us to get down to the individual person level and do a much better job here. And then ultimately, for me, the most exciting part of AI is really getting AI to the point where it is the basis of generating new products and services. So this is both generating new products and services in kind of a traditional way, but also on the fly. We had a group of clients together last Thursday who were all marketers, so the CMOs and some of their teams from some of our large clients. And one of the questions that was asked was about, will AI help us predict which products are better for which customers? And of course we said, yes, of course it will. You know, look at Amazon, look at Shopify, look at what these companies have done in terms of predicting what your customers might be interested in. But I said, but I don't think that's where we're going to see this end. Where we're going to see this end is, why do we have a product shelf when we can use AI to generate products and services or product and service bundles on the fly? This is particularly compelling, I would think, for telecom and financial services. Right? Why do we have 7 checking accounts with different combinations and permutations of features? If we can use the AI to predict what it is that you need based on your habits and your personal behavioral characteristics, then we should be able to assemble a product on the fly that makes the most sense for you, that maximizes the benefit to you, and of course, optimizes the benefit to the company selling it to you. And so to me, that's kind of the panacea. And we've seen some interesting examples here in advanced manufacturing and in healthcare. There's a company called Autodesk, and they have a product called Dreamcatcher. And they're able to use Dreamcatcher to run simulations of new products. They run simulations of new products, and they can run thousands and thousands of simulations of new products and test them in a much faster way than humans can identify prototypes, build the prototypes, and test them. And so we're getting a lot faster at creating new products and services and a lot better at matching those to customers, sorry. So I just wanted to give a couple of examples that are real-life examples that we've done. So this one actually uses computer vision that Nagar was talking about earlier. We teamed up with a global insurance company that wanted to improve the way they do auto claims. So in this case, our client allows their customers to take pictures of their damaged vehicle, to upload it, and the AI will perform the insurance adjustment based on the photo. If it can't do it, it'll send out an adjuster, but if it can do it, it's done immediately, and the claim can be processed completely digitally. When they set out to do this, they really set out to do it as a way to gain efficiencies, but also to improve customer satisfaction. What we ended up finding was we were able to identify incidences of potential fraud in claims that were not even on their radar before. So a really interesting example. This one speaks exactly to what Allison was talking about. So we found that this is a company called Textio, and what they found was through a number of different research reports that the quality of a job posting has a great impact on the quality of the candidates that apply, and then ultimately the quality of the candidate that gets hired. And so they started working on AI that will look at hundreds of millions of job postings. So that's their data set. And just a comment on data sets. I mean, data sets is the #1 thing that researchers need in order to move us ahead more quickly. But in some fields, particularly in some business fields, there is quite abundant data to be used. Job postings is one, right? When a company releases a job posting, that is in the public domain. So if you wanted to get access to hundreds of millions of postings, you could do that. So what they've done is they've accessed hundreds of millions of job postings. They've analyzed what those job postings say in terms of words and phrases and what outcomes that those job postings have had. And then from that, they will take your job posting. Let's say you're trying to hire someone. They will run that through their algorithm, and that algorithm will suggest changes in the phrasing that will help you improve the level of candidates. And what they have found is when they're trying to recruit a particular group, like women, for example, they can use the AI to look at where have job postings been successful in hiring women, and then they will allow you to tweak your job posting in order to attract more women. So this is, exactly what Allison was talking about just a minute ago. I can't answer the question about whether the interviewers are biased, but at least the job posting in this case is helpful. And another one is in asset failure. So one of the industries where AI is getting a ton of interest is industries that have large networks of heavy assets. Energy is one of those. This is an example of a wind turbine company. A company we work with in Spain called NEM Solutions, and what they've done is they have created models for wind turbines. And they've created models of wind turbines that are based on their manufacturing process, but then they've created environmental models as well. And so rather than it traditionally look at how is the asset functioning according to the way it functioned in the factory, they're blending that together with environmental models to say how is that asset functioning real time in the environment in which it's in, with the different wind and sun and rain conditions. And so it's doing a really good job of predicting where asset failures might happen, but also, as I was saying earlier, doing a much better job of not predicting failures, of reducing the number of false positives that are predicted. And this for industries with asset networks is a huge, huge efficiency. And so just in closing, I'll just talk about some of the things that we think need to happen here with our clients in order for with businesses in general, in order for this adoption to happen. The first is organizational awareness. There is a tremendous, I think lack of knowledge would be generous. I think misunderstanding of what AI is and can do in the real world amongst organizations, and I'm talking at very, very senior levels, at executive levels and boards of directors. They don't understand. They're getting information about what AI can do in tiny little sound bites from, you know, the En Route magazine, and I think missing the point of what it can do, but also getting a little bit caught up in some of the pitfalls of it, which apply to certain circumstances, but not other circumstances. On this question of ethics and responsible AI, and I'm sure most of you have heard of the term FATML, which stands for fairness, accountability, and transparency. There's a ton of work being done in this space, and I think it's really, really important work. I also think, however, sometimes that gets used as a reason not to move forward. So there are certain decisions that are heavily, heavily influenced by fairness and transparency, and we need to be very careful. Things like who we hire, or who we extend credit to, or who we sentence in the case of jail. But there are also problems that don't require that kind of scrutiny, and we need to make sure that we take those two things apart and we apply the right scrutiny to the right kind of problems, and we don't let that discussion slow us down in other areas. So for example, in the area of Textio, right? Nobody's going to be hurt if a job posting gets tweaked and has slightly better language, right? Or in the case of using AI to make sure your wind turbines are functioning. No person is going to get hurt because we're applying AI to understand if a wind turbine is functioning. So that's what I mean when I say we have to be really careful on the topics that have an impact on people, and then we need to move ahead really with those that are just good for business and good for society. So organizational awareness is one. Talent is another. As we've been talking about today, we need to make sure that our organizations have the right talent, have the right set of STEM skills, but also the right set of communication skills, problem-solving skills, and just the ability to look beyond the way that things operate today and imagine how they might operate in the future. In terms of compute power, that compute power, as I said earlier, is available. We need to move, I think, in particular, Canadian companies to adopting more progressive cloud strategies so that compute capability is available when we need it. Data, we talked about data. I think for large companies who have pretty large data sets about their customers, the question is addressing any priority data gaps, and also looking at augmenting internal data, internal company data, with the vast amount and growing amounts of public data that's available. And then finally, solution development approaches. This is what I was saying earlier, that 3 years ago, we had no choice but to say if we want to move ahead with AI, we better go out and hire our own PhDs, do our own research, and build from scratch. Now we can be a little bit more aggressive and say, you know what, let's take advantage of products and services, products and software solutions that are on the market, and get really smart people with an understanding of technology and an understanding of how our business works to use and deploy those solutions rather than have to invent everything from scratch. So that's it. So that was in closing. There you go. I had one more slide. So I'm going to sit over here. Okay.
I'm very excited here. I'd like to thank the organizers for making this happen. often. It's very impressive first time out. And I know I was talking to my peers, and we're all really excited the fact there's so many young, brilliant women who are going into this field, and I think this conference has really shown that it's not just fighting to get the talent, we have the talent. My name is, was said earlier, is Fawn Annan. I am the president of Canada's top IT publishing company, so we're covering topics like this all the time. Before we go on to the panel, the one thing I want to say is one of the industries that will and is being impacted by AI is entertainment and media. And there are so many ways it's being applied and will be applied. Just as a newsmaker, imagine that you turn your podcast on through Alexa in the morning, and there's your favorite broadcaster not only talking to you about the news, but also answering your questions. I mean, that's what deep learning is all about, so a very exciting time. So I'd like to start off with Cindy Gordon, who has a presentation, so I'm going to turn the podium over to you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and it's really great to be here. I flew in last night from Mexico about 11 o'clock, worked on my slides, knew it was really important to wake up at 5, and I'm just so thrilled to be here, and I'm glad that the little bit of the snow has left as well. Before I get underway, I really want to say thank you to Allison, because, you know, this is a voluntary effort, right? And there's a lot of folks that have come together, so I'd really like everybody to say thank you. And the fact that she also brought her mother here, and your mother, you said, was 87? I would like her to stand up, because we are all here because of mother. So, you know, thank you, wherever Allison's mother is. Wow, it's so cool to be generous, right? And it's such an easy thing to do. I'm going to give you a little bit of context about who Sales Choice is, what we do, share a little bit about my background, and then sit down as fast as I can because there's so many other wonderful people to hear from all of you today. I want to talk about an area that is so significant. It's the area of sales. Our entire global economy depends on our ability to advance a solution, to be able to actually generate revenue to sustain growth. It doesn't matter if you're not for profit or profit, you definitely need to advance to a win, in whatever the win you choose it to be. A win does take resources and it takes capital. We've had the situation in sales, and I'm a former Xerox gal in sales, and spent a lot of my earlier years there. I was a partner at Accenture, I was a venture capitalist, and I have always felt that this area could really be solved, but with augmented intelligence. So these three problems are pervasive and they're serious and they're not always talked about, but these are boardroom issues. First of all, in the last 10 years, the human cognition span has dropped by 50%. Most people don't talk about this or know about that point. Since the advent of mobile, human comprehension to be able to focus is now less than 8 seconds. This is a very serious issue in cognitive processing power. We are an extremely distracted generation. Accenture did some amazing research called the distracted age that Berkeley Warburton, a partner of Jodi's, had written. And I highly recommend you take a look at it because it really set the stage. The other factor is within sales professionals, not just that other dynamic, at least 30% of them in sales do suffer from attention deficit disorder, in addition to the dropping human cognition. So they are a species onto their own, and if you are any of you salespeople in this room, there's got to be some hands, come on, it's got to be somebody. Admit it, admit it. Okay, so a few of you, so you know the attention spans are like tsetse flies, right? They often are attracted to the next shiny object. They're a tough gaggle to lead as well, in terms of particularly the natural hunters. But here's the other disturbing fact. 30 to 60% of sales professionals do not meet their sales targets in B2B organizations globally. That's why you definitely have some of the future research coming out on the need for augmented intelligence. The piece that also has me a little bit worried, this came out of Accenture's research just in, I think it was 8 months ago. B2B sales customers facing productivity has declined from 30 to 36% 6% over the past 5 years. The price of a miss can be trillions to an economy. So these are real problems. I think AI needs to focus in, the most important point is, what is the problem you are trying to solve? If you can't get the clarity there, then you shouldn't even be talking about AI. And there are many people that have, quite frankly, not defined a succinct problem that's worthy of a challenge. In terms of our company, we've built a platform. This is a privately held company. The platform works. It's been proven out in some of the largest data sets in the world. So I'm very, very proud of the fact that it's got the robustness. It's on the Amazon stack. It's also a certified app with Salesforce, but it has an open API. And what we do effectively is we basically analyze all of the data that's in a CRM infrastructure. We can also take in data outside the CRM, and we put all the pieces of the puzzle together to be able to guide sales professionals in real time. It's like a sales GPS. Are you in the right destination, or are you heading in the wrong destination? We can get to levels of 99% accuracy on predicting the duds. Particularly, they call them the distribution A, B, C, D, F. The Fs, we are getting to 98% to 99% accuracy in most of our clients by just simply focusing on the best possibilities before you've done anything. And we've proved this out in some very large brands. If they just stop chasing a particular client account, they could basically save themselves millions. Humans are incredibly optimists, and salespeople are the most incredible optimists that are out there. But there are, as a law of diminishing returns, especially on large data sets. So these are the use cases we focus on. I'm not going to drain them, but prioritization of pipelines, forecasting, predictive churn. We've just done some early experimentation with Alexa. How cool it is to wake up in the morning, and you know how salespeople are running to their next meeting, they say, and I can simply say, what are my best 3 coaching points with Jody today? What are the best opportunities that we should really raise to the board? Where are we failing here? What are our weak spots? This whole world is going to open up with voice augmentation onto data sets within sales. It's going to be a really cool world to continue to evolve in. We're well recognized now. It's been a lot of hard work. I won't say it's been for the weak of heart, but now profiled by Gartner, IDC, and it's been really, nice to have such an incredible team work so very hard to get us to this point. Recently, I also wear a hat in Canada, which I need to highlight with CATA. I'm the innovation spokesperson for Canada for women in tech, so I'm often the lady behind the scenes, either giving advice on policy reformation or changes, or roping in other folks to really get out front. Fawn and I actually worked on legalizing equity crowdfunding in this entire country. And I just say that in the sense that it's amazing when you get a group of incredibly talented people together, you can move mountains. We have a chance here with AI to be absolutely one of the top global players. We're probably one of 4 in the world. However, China has just surpassed us in a very significant way with some of their advances, because they've got national policy that can go across everything. We've got multiple security regulators in this country. If there's anything all of us can maybe change, is basically get us to one unified platform here. Had to get that in. I'm a person that I like to put our customers up front. It just happened to be, and this wasn't planned, but you have a chief marketing officer who's very well known in your community, and that is Anastasia Valentine. So take a mic, Alice. And what I've had the pleasure of working with Anastasia is just that she is a change agent. She's a force to be reckoned with. So Anastasia, I know you know half the people in the room, but what are you using Sales Choice, and how has it changed? And I think Jody made a very good point when she said the ACT part, because that is so true. We're explainable AI at Sales Choice.
Yeah, I think one of our biggest challenges overall was volume. We have a pretty lean and mean team, but dealing with the volume of leads, the volume of phone calls, and volume of opportunities, this technology, or AI even in general, allows us to scale. So whether we're trying to programmatically attract those leads that will close, and then analyze those voice conversations to make sure that they're positive and the sentiment is right, and then using Sales Choice for our sales team to, one, keep them on biased because sometimes, they go astray. And notoriously, they haven't been very good with putting in data. So data quality is really our foundation now because we have it coming in from programmatic points. So we've got that chain of command where an API can change, where, the data might not be quite right. So that has to be totally in order. And then we have to get our salespeople to be consistent in entering their data properly. So what Sales Choice allows us to do is once that's all done and the data quality is in place, we're able to see, are we closing? What kind of leads are we attracting? Are they A's? Are they F's? Do I focus my closers on the A's and the B's, and then maybe get our sales development team to focus on the other lower ranking ones? And consistently, that does allow us to hit our numbers, and not the ego talking here, but to not miss, to actually close and meet the numbers monthly, on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis. So we've been able to experience 50% year-over-year growth for the last 3 years, and Sales Choice has been really helpful with us to allow us to use that technology to scale when getting humans to do that might be error-prone and also take way too long for us to do our jobs.
Thanks, Anastasia. And again, that wasn't rehearsed, it was just spontaneous. And I invite anybody who'd like a free trial of Sales Choice to absolutely connect, because I came into this market very skeptical. I'm an intellectual, researcher type, but I have a strong business mind, and I really wanted to see if we could unlock 30 to 60% of sales professionals do not make their sales quotas worldwide. That problem has been there for over 40 years, probably even more than that because we weren't tracking the data before then. And it's not the people. The people are distracted. So this is a game changer. Whether it's us or another player, but sales with AI is absolutely a game changer. I'm not going to dwell on my background because there's many other speakers to speak, but I do hope that you will connect. And the most important point is Fawn, myself, and John Reed, president of CATA, we have created a new not-for-profit infrastructure. It's an AI directory. It's a totally voluntary-led group. If there's any volunteers, see us after. We are trying to make all the Canadians that are in AI and data sciences visible to the global community. China will be coming up shortly, and the US. Just go to aidirectory.ca. Your profile will be vetted, so you have to have the background in AI and data sciences to some degree. That has to look like you've got a nucleus there to be part of the profiling group. Jody's also on our advisory board, but I do welcome you to see that community because there's people right across the country. Although Jody and I had coffee this morning, she said we're missing Calgary, and I'm an Alberta gal, so I got to get a few of those folks out there from Calgary. So I hope you can join us there, and thank you very much for the time, and thank you for Ellison and everybody who contributed to today, and I know that this is a force to be reckoned with. Ottawa, when it wakes up, it's a rockin' town in tech. So I've always been proud to be here in Ottawa. Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to go to Solmaz. I know she doesn't have slides, but yes, if you could, thanks.
Thanks to Alison for putting such an amazing event together. And I thought at this point in the day, you've seen lots of slides, have heard from my amazing panelists, and I just wanted to give you a little overview of how we use machine learning and AI in Shopify, in general in industry, and also sort of inspire the people who are not in the field but want to belong on how you can become part of this amazing industry. So Shopify is an Ottawa-born company. We've been publicly traded since 2015, and we are a commerce platform. Our mission is to make commerce better for everyone. So we have over 600,000 merchants on the platform. Some of them are famous people that you might know. Depending on the age group you hang out with, you might know Kylie Jenner better than Rebecca Minkoff, or simple stores. If you walk in the market, there's a store, Road Trip, and that's a Shopify merchant. So from big and small, we have different merchants. And we handle everything for them, from back office to front office. So part of making commerce better for everyone means democratizing commerce. So if you are a big company, you can afford to have marketing specialists, you can afford to have fraud detection. All of that is at your fingertips. But what if you've just started, you've just had your first sale, and you receive an order, and you don't know if it's going to be fraudulent or not? Putting yourself in the shoes of that merchant at that point in time is how we bring a human face to AI in Shopify. So we choose solutions that can be applied to our big merchant base and the solutions that have a high impact. For example, a few years ago, we picked fraud detection for our merchants. So for every order that comes through Shopify from our over 600,000 merchants, that's millions of orders per minute, we use machine learning and algorithms to predict the probability of an order being fraud. And I'm more than happy to actually say in our team, we have many intelligent data scientists, many women from different backgrounds that are working on this problem. So by using our vast amount of data and AI, we've been able to bring this sort of state-of-the-art fraud detection not only to big merchants, but to small ones that wouldn't be able to afford this. We've done sort of similar advances in marketing technology, so being able to recommend to our merchants where should they spend their ad money, where should they have their ads placed, so on and so forth. So these are the situations where we use AI and machine learning to solve a problem. We try to really deeply understand the problem that the merchant is facing, and we use our data and solutions to solve the problem. But the other aspect is, as Jody mentioned, creating opportunities with AI. So another product that my team works on is our cash advance. So we look at our merchant base, and we have this product where we want to give them cash to help them grow their business. But we would only take money back when they make sales and they are successful. So that's an opportunity where AI allowed us to basically create this product, because looking at the data that we have on our merchants, not just traditional data points that the financial institute would have, but more behavioral patterns, we were able to select merchants and we were able to determine when should we give them the offers, for how much money, and how long it would take them to pay us that money back. So the opportunities are unlimited. Commerce is the oldest trade in the world. It's the oldest profession, and it's complicated, and it's messy, and it's beautiful. So we try to apply AI to different steps of that. But that's about us. What about everybody else that wants to join the field? I want to say in 2008, I did my master's, and I used recurrent neural networks, and I was very proud of myself. I had spent 2 years doing that. But now somebody can do that same work probably in a weekend with TensorFlow, and there is an abundance of yeah, so it's shocking, but it's really good, because it also, with the abundance of data available, you can use machine learning and data to solve the problems that you are interested in, and that way make your voice be heard in the field. So I'm more than excited to hear from you guys. We have 5 people from our team here as well. Feel free to talk to them. Yeah. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking with you, and also all of us are here to help you if you want to join our team or any of the data teams in Shopify.
So I'm a small business, an SME in Canada. How do I actually start with Shopify? What are the steps?
That's a very good question. So you go to shopify.com. You basically select a name for your store, and within 2 to 3 minutes, your store would be built for you. So then you can, depending on, like, if you're an existing business, we have tools for you to bring, like, your domain, your sales, your history of business, or if you're new, we'll also give you the capabilities to fill out those information, and within, like, less than 5 minutes, you actually have a storefront. And then you can set up payments, you can set up shipping, and all of those, the beauty of machine learning solutions we use is that there's no robot dancing on the screen, but it's all these predefined choices that we help you make without you having to sort of think about consequences of the choices you have to make.
One of the things that you do with your application, you're really disrupting the whole supply chain. So what does that look like?
So I mostly talk about the financial aspect of products, but we also do a lot with algorithms and shipping services. So imagine if you're a small merchant. If you're a big merchant, you probably have warehouses. You probably have optimized the bejesus out of, like, how your supply chain works. But what if you are 6 small merchants that are sort of located close to each other, and we can help you by aggregating your inventory and by knowing that when your sales are going to come in and where your customers are allocated, helping you have best shipping route or best shipping service to meet, because while Amazon has made the expectation of free and fast delivery in less than 2 days, achieving that for small business is very hard. So what we say always, like, make commerce better for everyone and democratize that capability using data and AI.
Great, thank you. One of the questions. It sounds to me like AI really is now AI as a service, because most small companies aren't going to be able to afford. I know I can't. I'm wondering, Jody, is there research from Accenture on this?
I don't have any research with me, but I will tell you that I was presenting at the Vector Institute 2 weeks ago. They did a conference day for their business sponsors, and as I was preparing the presentation, one of my colleagues who lives outside of Toronto in Durham sent me a newspaper article. And when I say he sent me a newspaper article, he took a photo of a newspaper on his couch and sent it to me. And it was the Durham Gazette. And I know none of you have ever heard of the Durham Gazette. And in the Durham Gazette was an article about Durham College, who had launched 6 months ago a program where for Durham small businesses, they could come to Durham College, get assigned a Durham College student working on AI, who would spend 6 months with them coming up with an AI solution. I mean, you know, you talked about TensorFlow. I mean, Google is making available tons and tons and tons of AI services for free, for the most part, as long as you know how to use them and are willing to invest the time to understand, you know, what these algorithms can do, what their potential is. And so I actually think, so on the one hand, I think there are more and more ways as a service for sure, but also other creative ways in which small businesses can access AI. And the second thing that I think is fascinating about small businesses is large companies have a huge problem in breaking apart their silos of legacy processes and legacy systems in order to embed AI into the underlying business processes. So yes, large companies have the money and the data infrastructures to do AI in an experimental way. Like I was talking before, you know, you can come up with these great insights, but unless you can act on it in the moment, they're not that useful. Small companies that have started in the last 5 years, last 10 years, or are small, don't have that same legacy siloed infrastructure that they need to break down, and it's actually much easier to embed AI into the process. Because don't forget, the insight itself needs to be embedded into the action in order for it to deliver value. You gave a great example of cash advances. Well, you could come up with beautiful models that suggest which of the merchants you should extend cash to, but unless you have a process where you can, in the moment that the merchants need the money, extend that cash on a real-time basis, you're not going to make any money from that venture. Yeah, of course you do.
And Cindy, on your speech, one of the things that you were talking about was the salespeople and their concentration ability. I'm just wondering if that really comes into the whole area when they're buying a product like you have, you're really addressing change management within the entire business. How do you handle that, and what's the process?
Well, the process, honestly, I think it varies from client to client. What we are trying to do is make sure that we've got leaders that are passionate about the change agenda, and that we certainly had with Anastasia. There's no question, if you don't walk the talk and use the tools, you're not going to necessarily get the behavioral change. We've seen that in certain accounts where, you know, the senior VP wants to experiment with AI, the director of sales ops is really keen to advance, but if the senior people don't reinforce and act and use the tool themselves, you know, quite frankly, you know, these things, like any kind of innovation, will actually fade. So we're very, very careful now in the sense of the clients we will pick. I won't go into an engagement now unless I can see that there is a C-level, serious sponsor who's walking the talk. We do put in the training programs. We have the monitoring processes. We're also now experimenting in the sense that we know people aren't going to log into the actual app or Salesforce, so we're actually pushing the patterns in very creative ways in the sense of sort of the first release of, I'd call it natural language alert notification, something called Sully Says. So in other words, keep things very, very alert in their mobile, i.e. These 3 opportunities are on the edge. You've just reintegrated those into your commit. However, you know, our assessment is that you're not going to close. We also explain the reasons. We've got a new UI that gives that context. So some of the, I call it, more advanced progressive leaders are using that prescriptive analytics layer, so it's just not predictive, to change things. But, you know, people are going through a learning curve. I think Jody hit it right on. She said we've got to hit the board of directors in a very serious way in this entire country. We want Canada to be an AI player. And in terms of sales leaders themselves, there is a gap in math skills that, you know, myself, you know, then I guess I've always been a data geek, so I'm not surprised. I've got a statistical background with my doctorate, but it is very disappointing when I see leaders leading sometimes Fortune 500 companies or mid-market who are not good at math. It's actually quite frightening, Fawn. I'm scary, but it's true.
Well, this is actually a good segue into Kara McMillan, because we're talking about behavior, and you do have a presentation?
Yes, just a couple of charts.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. My background is strategy and innovation, and oops, this moves. And what I want to talk today about is more through the entire supply chain. And so we're going to take a step kind of sideways and look at it more from the perspective of AI. Yes, it's robotics. But like Jody said, it's also enhanced learning and judgment and prediction. And I want to talk about some of the implementations that we've been involved with and we're dreaming about to try to get Canada to be number one. Let's see if this works. Oops. It's locked. There. Efficiency across the supply chain. 88% of Canadian companies already have global supply chains. And with NAFTA in question, we need to look to new trading partners. And some of those trading partners are demanding that we also understand the amount of carbon and greenhouse gases we're emitting into the world. And we haven't got a very good track record here. But there is a huge opportunity. And we have the know-how. If you look at the World Economic Forum sponsored in 2017 a CEO executive survey, and they said, all right, what are the top risks to your business? Extreme weather events was number 1. Natural disasters is number 2. Cyber attacks, data fraud, 3 and 4. And failure of climate change mitigation and adaptation is 5th. 3 of the top 5 risks our worldwide CEOs talk about are related to climate change. So let's talk about it. Do you guys, I'm not sure everybody in the room is going to remember 1980. Some of us don't want to. But back in 1980, there were 200 major storms. It was a big deal if there was a flood in Ottawa, Bancroft, or even in Brantford, like there was last week. At the end of 2016, there's more than 700. We actually have to change some of the hurricanes categories for the first time in our global history. They include temperatures, droughts, fires, floods, mudslides, and storms. We're dumping 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the atmosphere every 24 hours. And this was 2016. We're a little nervous that the numbers for 2017 may come in higher. I'm not trying to scare you. This is a huge opportunity for Canada, and I'm pumped. So if we look at the supply chain, look at all the opportunities of where carbon dioxide is coming in through thawing the permafrost, coal mining and coal plants. In Canada, we've committed by 2030 that the coal production will be off coal plants. So we don't have to focus in on those. But let's talk about industrial agriculture, land transport. Let's talk about fertilization, crop burning, oil production, and air transport. Every one of those segments have huge opportunities, and they also have big data. Because like Jody said, they already have established processes, data collection. And if we can pull that information out, we can start making a huge difference right away. Let's talk about industrial processes. With respect to industrial processes, that's probably more of the automation, where we're trying to look at, rather than judgment, what are ways we can drive efficiency through it? There's this great company in Aurora, it's called Flow Water. And they wanted to do something completely unique. They wanted to eliminate plastic bottles. So they have introduced a fiberboard product that's put together with a plastic. The plastic is made from sugar cane, so it's biodegradable. Their water process, they have tracked through the point of the source, which is in Bruce Peninsula, all the way to shipments in China, where they can decrease carbon dioxide. It's a really cool Canadian success story. Land transportation in the United States, there's something called positive train control. And that one is really exciting because in the last number of years, we've had a few train disasters. What is happening now is they're looking at with checking all of the train tracks, either with sensors or drones, to find out if there's any impediments to the train track in any way, shape, or form, and feeding all of this information back to the conductor. So with the prediction of perhaps as you go around this curve, you should potentially slow down to 80 miles an hour because there might be water on the tracks, is now immediately available for conductors. And with quick storms coming up, this is going to save lives, save product, and create a huge cost reduction throughout the entire supply chain. Water management. I was in a lecture, and this one was really interesting. This is just dreaming, but the technology's there if we could apply it. There's water in the north where naturally occurring arsenic is leaching into the lake. And one of the things that they've been tracking is if they could add oxygen, they can lower the arsenic, increase the bacteria. Did you know there's bacteria that eat arsenic? There are. So they could increase the number of bacteria that eat the arsenic and have a clean water. Now, it's being tracked, but it's a very remote location. So if we could track it and then feed it into a robot that could introduce oxygen into the water, that water would be drinkable year-round. Forest management. There's already software companies out there that are, and there's a really interesting study coming out of the University of Oklahoma and the University of Alberta after the Fort McMurray fire, where they're looking to see which trees forestry companies should cut down to improve the life of the forest. So that the fuel ones, the ones that'll burn more quickly, can be cut and harvested for sale, and in so doing, save the entire forest. Oil production. If you remember on the previous slide, it said oil production is driving a lot of carbon dioxide. One of the benefits of a low oil price is that we've been really working at efficiencies, and so pumpers are able to check the seismic data and look to see how much potentially oil is there. Is this the type of well that's going to give off more carbon dioxide or less, and increase the overall efficiency of the entire production. Sustainable agriculture is an emerging area. And one of the things that's happening right now internationally is there's projects saying in sustainable fishing and sustainable food, how are we able to ensure that our practices are respectful of the animals, respectful of the earth, and decrease carbon dioxide. This data is available, but again, taking it to that next step is where we're lacking. It's our earth. Canada's got a chance to lead with artificial intelligence in the tracking of carbon dioxide and mitigating it. Just to end, I'd like to show this picture by Michelle Valberg, who's a partner of mine in the Canada's 150 Women for Nature. Michelle, this is Spirit Bear. Michelle graciously allowed me to share the picture with you. Raven told the world that she would leave a reminder of the Great Ice Age, so that we could see in our earth our responsibility to fix it and to heal it. Spirit Bear is born in the BC rainforest. Let's keep her memory alive so that we can heal our earth and grow Canada's economy exponentially and dominate in the AI space through the supply chain. Thank you.
Can you tell us who you're working with on some of these issues that you're bringing up?
Unfortunately, we sign very strict NDAs because we're in the strategy side of the business and innovation. I can say that they're major Fortune 500 companies, but I really can't go into much more depth than this at this point. Although I can say I work with Flow. Right. I'm very proud to say that I work with Flow Water because it's an amazing company, and we've really worked on their strategy of sustainability to the point where they are a certified B Corp, which means they're a company that does good.
But you should tell the audience why they're so amazing, what they've done with the technology.
Flow is the company that is working on completely eliminating plastic water bottles. And they're also eliminating through the supply chain any use of chemicals in their manufacturing process. They actually use ultraviolet light to clean the water. So on all sides, they have been innovative to ensure that this water is precious and that it's healthy.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you.
Just talking about working with people, you're working with chief revenue officers, not just VPs of sales. Is there any insights that you can share with us on how they're viewing this?
I think the Americans have woken up to utilization of AI in a far more alert fashion than the Canadian chief revenue officers are. From what I can see, I mean, Jody can probably comment as well. I think there's a lot of education that's needed, around at the top levels. In terms of the chief revenue officers, in Canada, we are very much more often a distribution channel than we are truly a global set of CROs. So I think that also brings up a certain skill set. I mean, the gaps that we have in skills here are often in marketing and in sales, and having a very much a global, experience set. I think from what I can see, the CROs, I'm just kind of going through the different client account I think the ones that have always been innovative and natural experimenters, and who really aren't afraid to change. Sorry, I guess I'm supposed to have the mic on. I'm so sorry. I guess I'm talking too quietly. And I've got a bit of a cold. Sorry about that. So I think the most important skill for leaders right now is reflection and renewal to be a top C-level player. I mean, that is, in that resiliency kind of quotient. And, taking the time to want to pause, which is hard for salespeople, like just to have a sense of being, that sense of mindfulness. And through that, I think emerges the most important problems that we can solve together with AI. So I think there's a lot of work to do in retooling our CROs. You would see that in the need for digital transformation, right, through the research that you do. Jody, I think, could do a good build on this question as well. So I'm just going to pass her the mic if I can do that.
Yeah, I was actually also interested in Jody talking about the percentage, if you can, of CEOs that are actually adopting AI right now.
So we did a study last year, and we called it the AI quotient. We looked at the AI quotient. So we looked at company, and this is a global study that did include Canada, and we looked at AI capability from two perspectives. One was the company's own set of skills and capabilities in AI, and the second dimension was the company's ability to partner with and select external providers of AI. And we found that across all of the companies we surveyed, about 17% are currently getting it right. And so that leaves, and probably Shopify is one of them. So that leaves 83% of companies that either haven't figured out their own skill sets and capability development plays, or haven't yet figured out that they need to partner externally. It is a funny technology, and I get asked this question a lot, like, isn't this just another wave of technology, right? We've seen, you know, most of you haven't been around for that many waves of technology, but, you know, when we had the internet and we said, okay, well, this is going to change everything, and then we had mobile, and that was going to change everything, and before that we had client server, and that was going to change everything. So isn't this just one more of those things that changes everything? And I think the answer is this is slightly different. Slightly different for two reasons. One, because of what we talked about earlier with the ethics, right? Never before, other than a little bit with data privacy, have I been involved in so many conversations with businesses about fairness, accountability, and transparency when it comes to a technology, right? This is not usually on the radar. So I think it's different from that perspective. And the other perspective that it's different from is the partnership angle. Like, I don't think any of us can realistically aspire to doing this all on our own. So it's for most companies. And it's really interesting to hear you talk, Eric, because it's also non-traditional partnerships that we need to look at. It's non-traditional partnerships, perhaps with academics, non-traditional partnerships with people perhaps out of industry, non-traditional partnerships because now we're able to take advantage of things as a service. And I think that, you know, Google, which I realize I've talked a lot about, but they've sort of changed the way we think about partnerships. I mean, it's amazing when we interview people from campus. I mean, they're fully versed in the entire Google stack because Google's figured out that they make this available to people in academic circles. They will graduate and it will translate into corporate, and they're absolutely right. But a lot of those services are free, and so now companies even like Microsoft are making a lot of their cognitive services available for free. So, I don't think that there's a huge percentage getting it right, and I'm sort of trying to articulate there's a few reasons why they're not yet getting it right. Yeah. The misinformation that I talked about before, the partnership, the new way of doing things, and the fact that this is different and needs to be thought of in a different way.
Right. And go ahead, Solmaz.
Can I just add something? I agree with you, Jody. One thing that I think people in AI and machine learning can do to sort of combat that is when we talk to people that are going to use the services, keeping top of mind that what can I bring to you as value, right? I think that's where you bridge the gap. Like even in Shopify, super innovative company, when we talk to product, we always try to say, okay, this is the problem that machine learning is going to solve for you, rather than like, this is machine learning and it's so cool and please let me play. And I think that's what makes us sort of a speaker at the table is the fact that we focus on the problem that's needed to be solved, and then we look at AI and machine learning as one of the tools we have in our toolbox.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, because I think sometimes we as enthusiasts of AI do ourselves a disservice because we're so excited about the algorithms, and we want to share, you're nodding, we want to share all the excitement we have about the algorithm, and the person on the other side of the table just cares, am I going to sell more widgets or am I not going to sell more widgets? And so I do think we sometimes do ourselves a bit of a disservice because we get so excited about these things. And so we have to figure out how to make sure we're putting it in business terms at all times.
Yeah, but you know, one of the things that strikes me is kind of like the early days of electricity. I mean, it was unique, and it was only for the very, very wealthy, the hoteliers, etc. But AI is going to be the same thing. It's going to be as ubiquitous as everything else that we're used to. I mean, I think of Kara and your Women in Nature. There's 150 of you, and you're all from different disciplines. You're all coming together to make a difference, and AI is one of those tool sets that, whether it's Margaret Atwood representing literature or yourself, that you can talk about, write about, consult about. So it's pretty exciting. You know, I'm going to open it up to the audience. I'm sure there's quite a few questions for this panel of experts. Come on down. Come on down.
I have a couple of questions for the panel. My name is Devashish Paul. I'm the CEO and founder of Blue Wave AI. We're applying artificial intelligence for management of renewable energy, such as solar, wind, and battery storage in energy networks. Before I get to my question, the two questions, I'll just give some background. I went to Royal Military College in the 80s when women became fighter pilots. My classmates became F-18 pilots. and frontline infantry soldiers. And when I was in my class, all the women in my class were typically in the top 20% of cadets. Like the bottom 80% and the top 20 were filled by guys, but the bottom 80 was all filled by guys. Okay? So then I go to the Air Force, and I go into the industry. So I go into the Air Force, and it's 90% guys, right? Then I go into tech, and it's sometimes 99% guys. Working in the semiconductor industry in Silicon Valley, it's just all guys. And it just seemed to me, based on my experience, that we're wasting all of the intellectual capital. And so now, starting my own company, we're privately funded, and I'll go to a question to Jody in a second. I'm finding myself falling into the trap of bringing in people from my network, which is guys I work out with, guys that I've studied with, guys that I've worked with in the past. And so part of my motivation for coming here is, you know, as a company and as a leader in my company, I got to break ourselves out of this trap. So stepping away from the AI widgets that we're all passionate about, the first question to the panel is, you know, what are your recommendations for companies in general, whether they're led by men or women, to get out of this social trap that leads to this kind of lopsided sizing of the company headcount in the male direction? And the other one was to Jody. You mentioned $250 million raised in AI in Canada. So I want to get a bigger piece of that pie, first of all. So I'm totally selfish, and I can hire more women.
That's just VC money, I
yes.
should have said. That didn't include private. That was just VC money
Yes.
in 2017.
And so specifically to that, did that include the $100 million that Element AI raised? So it's really about 140-ish spread about among the rest.
Yeah, and none in Calgary apparently, but even that is significant.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So those were my two questions.
But I think that you're doing it right. First of all, in unconscious bias training, there are 7 ways in which we exhibit unconscious bias, and one of them is called people like me. Right. It is a natural instinct to surround ourselves with people like us. But you asked for a recommendation. I mean, I think you're doing it. One, we need to give you a round of applause for identifying the problem as you did.
Yeah, no, I don't deserve a round of applause. I think we just need to...
One, we need to talk about it, right? We need to say, I know a lot of successful, incredibly intelligent women. Why are they not in my tech company? 2, you need to come to forums like this and talk to people like Allison and figure out how to get them in, and I think that the third is, you need to be part of that conversation yourself, be part of the solution yourself. And when Allison and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and she said, don't worry, I've invited some guys as well. And not that I was upset about coming, but I think we have to be part of the conversation together. It's not good enough for just the women in the room to talk about it's very good timing too, with International Women's Day coming up later this week.
Yeah.
I think some practical ways is something that Negar mentioned. There's this directory of women in data science and machine learning. You just Google it, it shows up. So give people chances, like interview people from those lists, or make your company attractive to people of different kinds. And I think it's quite amazing. Having one woman now increases your chances of getting more women and help retain them in the company, not just get them to the company, but help them grow their career. And I think that goes a long way, and it makes you actually known in the industry, because women talk to each other and they're like, oh, that company is really good. I know my friend works there. And that one, be careful. So I think you're...
I don't want to be in the be careful category.
So I think you're taking the steps, but yeah, the lists, and there are women everywhere, but if it's hard to find them, there are lists upon lists that you can find very qualified individuals through.
It's not just the lists, finding the people, it's the culture itself. I went to a WCT event a couple of weeks ago, and the CEO of Pythian, who's Ottawa-based, was there. And he said the biggest issue...
Sort of the trade-off, like it's how do we draw the line between what needs to be private and being absolutely religious about making sure, and then saying what shouldn't be private and what it can be used to better. But the other thing I was going to say is that AI actually is a tool that's helping us improve privacy and security as well. So my colleague who's in cybersecurity, I mean, the #1 technology on his radar in terms of getting better at cybersecurity is to use AI in order to, particularly classification algorithms, because the problem we've had with cyber is we, the good guys, have to be one step ahead of the bad guys, and that's very difficult to do. With AI, the idea is to start classifying patterns without us having the knowledge of what those patterns might be. So I think there's some good news there. But if we can't take our eye off the ball for sure on the privacy question.
I'll just do a quick build on what Jody said. I think we actually have a perfect storm brewing. And I think if you went and asked every CEO in the Fortune 500 this simple question, they wouldn't have a good answer. And the question is, can you produce a list of your AI algorithms? Where are they? Who created them? When were they last updated? How statistically relevant are they? You'd find that you might be a little bit alarmed. So we've got kind of a generation moving right now, and we just worked on a series with Ernst & Young on AI transparency and risk, and there's 2 videos out on YouTube. So we do see a perfect storm brewing. Fortunately, all the audit firms that are pure audit, will start to elevate new brands. You'll start to see them from PwC, Ernst & Young, obviously Accenture, in terms of the ability to handle the strategy right through the full execution. And one of the things that Jody didn't mention, they've got 7,000 data scientists over at Accenture. Might even be 9 now. You guys have been growing so rapidly. But my main point here is that the technology suppliers, as we come in, right, and that's why we're on the explainable AI camp, where we will disclose our approaches, our methods, et cetera, under obviously NDA. Most companies don't know the types of approaches in AI, because for those of you in the room, you would know that there's maybe 70 or 100 different kinds of elevated techniques, right? It's not just AI. It could be the deep learning side. You could be using gradient boosting. You could be using bagging. You could, there's so many. You could be using Monte Carlo simulation. And my point here is that we do not understand always on the customer side the methods that are underneath the enablement, and we have a responsibility to, as CEOs, that's why I think this is very much a board level discussion, and there will be more things that I certainly want to do in the area in educating the boards of directors here, because they have a responsibility. We have very few, I'd call it audit groups. Even the banks right now, on your point on cybersecurity, they're very, very worried about what they need to do to augment their existing practices and policies. So it's a very, very wise question, and I know that we are, if we use the analogy, very naked in that question that I asked, because when you sit down with a Fortune 500 CEO, even a CIO, they cannot pull out that information at a heartbeat.
Thank you. Something. On the other side, we're also creating these technologies, to your point. So every time you work with a team or you're part of a team where they put a machine learning solution into production and it's going to impact the life of real humans, it's up to us also to put good standards in place. I spoke at a podcast a few months ago about individual steps that we carry on our fraud algorithms after we know it's a good algorithm. Like, we put it in shadow mode to see how it's going to react under different circumstances. And we try to get a sense of the reality. What happens if we predict this order wrong, or what happens if we predict it too late? And I think part of it is from the top, from the CEOs and C-level executive, but also part of it is on us as the implementers and as the people who design these technologies to also put good standards in practice. Because I think while the research has gone far, the bringing of these systems into production is sort of novel and exciting point, and there are many people working on it. So if you have opinions, voice them, join those conversations for sure.
Thank you.
I'm Dan Julian. I'm with Newfound Recruiting. I can't hear if that's loud or not. Thank you to all of you. You kind of gave me an introduction to AI in business. lesson today. And on that, and on the 83% of companies that are properly utilizing it, and on the companies that are a bit more old school that could be utilizing it for the environment, is there a book recommendation at all that would be intro to AI for business people, for C-level executives, for students looking to get into the tech sector, let's say, that you could recommend?
I mean, there's two coming out that I've gotten to pre-read that I really like, so that's kind of unfair, but they'll be out. One will be out at the end of March, and one will be out in April. One is called Prediction Machines, the Simple Economics of Artificial Intelligence, and one is called Humans Plus Machines, which is written by Paul Doherty, who's actually a colleague of mine, so I like those two. I also like, I like Andrew Ng's course on deep learning, which is free and available online, and I think he does a great job of explaining it in terms that that most people can understand.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elena. I'm finishing my master's at Carleton. The question that I had was concerning data quality. How do you deal with data quality within your organizations when you have things like missing values or bias based on individuals? Thank you.
So I can, yeah.
Biomedical engineering.
So I can talk about missing data. So most of the companies, if you're lucky enough to get data, the business of your company is something else, not getting the data. So for example, the business of Shopify is commerce, making commerce better for everyone. It's not to collect data. And as such, the sort of priority of our company is to offer the best service, and data is sort of like an artifact that we collect. So in that case, we have so many times where we have missing data, or we change some value, and then in future we have to kind of remember what was the value of the data before that change happened. So there are many tools out there for that, but the first step is kind of like getting an understanding, because missing value doesn't always mean the same thing. Sometimes the value is missing because the system was down, and sometimes the value is missing because the user decided not to disclose that value, and sometimes it's missing because you had a bug in production. So I think the first step is actually understanding the nature of your data to know when it's, what are its sort of basic behavior, so like basic descriptive statistics. But then there are many ways for sort of creating the missing data or taking the distribution backgrounds from it. So I think the first step would be to know what is the data point and what are you trying to infer from it, because then that would guide which way of dealing with the missing data is better.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple things. I actually think the problem, and I'm sure you'd agree, of missing data is the easy problem around data quality, because you know the data's missing. The hard question around data quality is when the data's not missing, but it's still wrong, and you don't know that. The trick to me is that you have to have the right set of processes for bringing in data, so that every piece of data that comes in has been somehow vetted. Now, it shouldn't be vetted by a human. That would take a lot of hours. But the process of bringing the data in is, because if you can make sure it's clean coming in, it's just so much easier later on. And then when you have gaps, to fill them. The only other thing I'll say on data, and we work with our clients, the more data you have, the more quality issues you're prone to have, just in raw numbers. I think part of the trick is prioritizing your data quality objectives and your data gap objectives, because you'll never have 100% clean data. That's don't even think about it for most practical applications. So figure out what the priority areas are that the quality is really important, and then focus on those.
Thank you.
Any closing remarks, ladies?
One more question.
Sorry.
I've got a question that came in from Twitter.
Okay.
What is the intersection point between AI and blockchain?
I think the reality, and Alison and I were talking, the reality of blockchain is that it has the potential to see large amounts of very important data go through it. And those large amounts of very important data that go through it can be fuel to train AIs. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, functionally, depending on what the blockchain is being used for, you can imagine certain AI applications. So, when the blockchain is being used for cryptocurrencies, you can imagine applications to predict demand for those cryptocurrency applications to identify fraud, or, I mean, blockchain takes care of some of the fraud just by its very nature, but there are still bad actors. So even people who are not committing fraudulent currency transactions, but who perhaps, if you trace the money back, the money came from not the best place, that's a good application for AI.
I think that's it.
Thank you. Very good.
So we have a networking session now. Ladies, all the speakers will be next door is where we'll have our lunch and be able to chat and discuss anything you learned or found fascinating. Note there's a couple of recruiters in the room, and that's for the university students. Could be interesting for you there. We'll have the, Danielle, if we want to put up the survey link again, try it again, please, because the hope is this is the first annual, this is the first annual event of this kind. That's my hope. So I do want feedback from each session, and then I'll send out also another email at the end of it after the networking session for comments overall. Okay, couple of things. Dr. Cindy Gordon mentioned and Fawn mentioned the AI directory. Please look into that. It's fabulous. They didn't accept my name because I'm a mechanical engineer by education. Finally, I'd like to invite our last speaker, Christina Tessier, who is the Director General of the Canada Science and Technology Museum, who, you know, offered and provided the fabulous event venue. Christina.
Good afternoon, everyone. I won't keep you long. I know I'm between you and your lunch. I want to congratulate Allison and all of the organizers on this amazing conference, being able to sit in and listen to the conversations, frankly intimidated by the amount of intelligence and powerful women here in the room. As someone mentioned, as we're moving into International Women's Day, this is a very timely conference to be having today. Bienvenue également à tous ceux qui joignent à nous de façon virtuelle. Ce musée ici est un des 3 des musées d'Ingénium, Musée des sciences et de l'innovation du Canada. Ingenium also includes the Canada Agriculture and Food Museum and the Canada Aviation and Space Museum. As museums of science and innovation, we play the role of communicator, connector, and enabler within the science, technology, and innovation ecosystem. We share stories of Canada's incredible research and discoveries with the public. We're a living lab where industry and academia are able to test their prototypes and products with our audiences. We even invest in applied research to explore how new technologies can better enable visitor experiences in our museums. AI is one of those topics that plays across all 3 of our sites, and why it's a particularly interesting issue for us to tackle across the 3 museums. Last week, my colleague who's here today and I were in the middle of interviews for new science advisors for our sites, and we asked one of our questions was, what are the top 3 issues facing Canada that we should be addressing across our 3 museums? And interestingly, climate change and AI came up across the board with those contestants. They understand how important these issues are for our country. This museum's been open for a little over 3 months. We're proud to say that we've had over 215,000 visitors through our site, and now we can count you among them. But now we're turning our attention to more of these issues that we need to look at beyond the exhibitions that you'll find on our floor, and of course AI is one of those. We've begun the chat here at Science and Tech through our Curiosity on Stage program, and in April we're looking forward to a talk that will include Element AI, DeepMind, Facebook, and Google, to explore kind of that AI 101, but also what it means for Canadian society. That's the role that we play here. As an average Canadian, what do you need to know about AI? How is it already impacting your life? Where do you turn to when you have those questions? And so we're looking to begin that national dialogue. We're looking for partners to do that with across our sites. And so we hope to work with some of you as a bridge between academia, industry, and government partners, as well as NGOs. so that we can further examine those impacts on Canadian society. I know that there's certainly a feeling in Canadian society that this is something scary, and so we need to really dig in and bring that knowledge to the table to help people better understand. So again, I don't want to keep you from your lunch. I want to thank you. I want to again congratulate the organizers on the conference. I do invite you to take the time, if you have it, to visit the museum today or on another day. Our staff are eager to welcome you here. And I would also mention that I have a number of colleagues that will be joining for the networking session, also to talk about women in STEM, which is a really important initiative here across our 3 sites. We really believe the importance of more women in that STEM system, and we have great examples here today. Thank you. Merci.